Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement, and we know that land acknowledgements can be controversial. This acknowledgement that we're about to say was actually written in partnership with an Indigenous elder who worked with Healing Equity United to recognize the importance of honoring the lands that we're occupying. So we want to start off today by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we're on as a way of expressing gratitude and appreciation to those territories we're residing on, and also as a way of honoring the Indigenous peoples who've been living and working on this land from time immemorial. It's important that we understand the longstanding history that's brought us here and seek to understand our place within that history, whether we came here by choice or we were forcefully brought to this country. Healing Equity United as an organization is on the lands of the Muwekma, the Ohlone, the Piscataway, and the unceded Duwamish territories. The reason that we're taking this moment to recognize those lands is because of the historic discrimination and violence that have been inflicted upon Indigenous peoples in the Americas, which have included their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their communities and their culture, which unfortunately still happens today. Over 100 million Indigenous peoples were slaughtered in the Western Hemisphere in the past 500 years. Today, there are only 6.8 million Indigenous folks left in the US. So we ask that you join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and the present, and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward to dismantle the continued oppression of Indigenous communities. We invite you now to honor the lands that you are on by entering their names into the chat. And if you're unsure of the land that you're on but want to find out so that you can honor those lands, Cassie will be putting a link into the chat for you all to be able to honor that and to look it up. Thank you for those of you who are starting to put those in. Really appreciate it. We also want to take a moment to formally welcome all of you. We want to welcome into the space people of all genders that might include people who identify as women, men, trans, genderqueer, or others, people of African descent, Black, African American, Asian descent, Arab descent, Pacific Islander descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latinx, people indigenous to this land, and people of mixed and multiple descents. We want to welcome those of you who speak different languages and all the languages that you speak, including Spanish, English, indigenous languages, sign language, etc. We want to welcome people of different class backgrounds, whether it's working class, middle class, owning class, or for those of us who aren't sure where we really fit on the class spectrum. We want to welcome people who currently struggle with getting access to the resources necessary for survival, especially in times like these. That might include healthcare, adequate housing, reliable transportation, childcare, and people who currently have more access to those resources as well. People with disabilities, visible or invisible. We also want to welcome people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, queer, or others for whom none of the labels fit. We want to welcome your bodies and the different ways you experience yours. That might include chronic pain, strength, attention, etc. People who identify as activists, organizers, and people who don't. We also want to welcome those of us who might be single, married, partner, dating, in monogamous or polyamorous relations. We want to welcome people of all ages, whether that you're in your teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. If you're beyond, you look really good. We want to also invite any emotions that you might be bringing with you today, whether that's joy, bliss, grief, rage, bewilderment, contentment, disappointment. We want to also invite those who support you to be here. Could be your families, genetic, furry, and otherwise, people who have different faiths, religious traditions, faith practices, private practices that don't belong to a tradition, agnostics, atheists, seekers, and others. And we also want to invite people who've been in sessions like these and those who haven't. And for those of us who are working from home, we also want to invite kids that might be playing in your background, whether those be human kids or fur kids. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to pass it over to Cassie.
Thank you, Jess. We'd also like to take some time to acknowledge we're in the midst of February, and that's Black History Month, and that this formal federal recognition does not right the wrongs of centuries of struggle for the Black community. White supremacy is embedded in our country's very existence, and we still have yet to live up to the principles that our country was founded on. Black History Month is not a passive commemoration. It's a thunderous call to radical action. The history of Black Americans is a testament to revolutionary courage, abolitionists who defied entire systems of oppression, civil rights leaders who transformed national consciousness through strategic resistance, and contemporary activists who continue dismantling racist structures with unbreakable resolve. Our movement requires committed, transformative action. We must speak out against injustice, challenge systemic racism in every space that we occupy, and fight with strategic, principled resistance. But resistance isn't only about confrontation. It's also about celebrating Black excellence, joy, and resilience. Michelle Obama reminds us that going high means never accepting oppression or allowing cruelty to go unchallenged. Now is the time to show up, speak truth, support Black-led movements, and actively work to create the just world we know is possible. And that's also partially why we are here today. So we'd also like to take some time to kind of set the container for our time together. These are some group agreements that Healing Equity United usually works off of. And so I'll go very briefly through each one. There's no room for the Oppression Olympics in this space. It doesn't behoove us, for example, to say, well, we need to solve XYZ oppression before this other oppression. At Healing Equity United, we operate from the idea that all of our oppressions are tied and therefore our liberation is tied. We're here to cultivate a brave space, not necessarily a safe space. We cannot, guarantee that what might come up in the conversation today might impact you. And so connected to this one, please take care of yourself during the time today. Expect and accept challenging moments, respect different lived experiences and perspectives. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Be okay with non-closure. I'm sure our conversation today could go on for much longer than the time that we have allotted. So be okay with that non-closure. Respect confidentiality. What's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here, goes beyond the space. And it's important to note that if you engage in bigotry, racism, white supremacy, etc., in the chat or verbally, we will be removing you from this space immediately. And again, last but not least, a final reminder to be your own boo, take care of yourself during the time that we have together. Fiona, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you. I am very briefly going to share a little bit about Healing Equity United, how we got started, what we do, and why we thought it was important to hold this space for this conversation. Jess and I started Healing Equity United a little over 6 years ago now because in our respective roles in nonprofit organizations, we were being called upon to support mainstream organizations in working with those people, whoever those people were, right? Those people were folks with marginalized identities. Meanwhile, we were doing our day-to-day jobs, whether that be as executive director or managing, we were doing full-time jobs. And we thought, okay, this isn't sustainable. Let's create something that is. Healing Equity United is the result. We provide support for nonprofit organizations to identify ways in which oppression, systemic oppression in its multiple forms, show up in the organization and detrimentally impact not only the services provided, but the folks who provide the services, the folks who work there, right? And so we do assessments, which are a snapshot in time. Where's the organization today? What are its assets in terms of what it's doing well? What are its gaps and challenges? We provide recommendations. The second bucket of work that we provide is around training. and I'm not talking about what I call the Starbucks model of something happens on a bad press day, you close down for a day, you do training, and then you reopen the next day and everybody's suddenly anti-racist, right? So we provide comprehensive trainings, work with our clients. 4 trainings range from about 6 months to a year. The final bucket of work that we provide and is technical assistance, and coaching falls under that, we believe. It's fairly simple to wrap your mind around, oh, I guess equality is okay. I guess equity is okay. You can do that theoretically, but when it comes to the day-to-day operation of your services, your organization, how do you really do that? How do you ensure that bias isn't impacting who you recruit to your board? How do you ensure that you aren't only looking for attorneys who look a certain way because of your internalized narrative about of excellence, right? And so we provide technical assistance in that regard of moving from the theoretical to the day-to-day application of DEIB principles. So that's a little bit about us. And now I'm really, really excited because we can shift into the conversation that you all came here for. So what I would love to do is to introduce myself. I'm going to try to make that as brief as possible so that you all can introduce yourselves. And I would just ask that you use about 2 minutes each to introduce yourselves in whichever way you like. At Healing Equity United, we lead with our identity. So I will share with all of the attendees and participants that my name is Fiona Oliphant. I'm a first generation Jamaican American, hence the Bob Marley music upon entrance. I'm sorry. Um, I gave myself a little leeway with that. Uh, my family members range from completely undocumented to naturalized citizens. And so I've always been well aware of the oppression that immigrants, especially those without documentation, face. Having said that, I'm a citizen. There's a lot of power and privilege in that identity. And I have to always ask myself how I can leverage that identity to be in better solidarity with immigrant communities. As you can see, I'm a Black woman, but I do want to highlight that the diaspora is large, right? And so even as a Black woman, the fact that my family came from a colonized or a country that was impacted by colonialism, right, informed how I perceived this society, the US. I'm an attorney. I'm barred in New York and DC. And even though I don't currently practice law, I have to be mindful for some people that makes me an alienating and intimidating figure. For others, it makes me a person who's suddenly credible, valuable. And those same people would choose to ignore me if they didn't know that about me. The last part that I'll share about my identity is that I'm from the South Bronx in New York City, a community that is primarily Black and brown, has higher rates of crime, of poverty, of substance use, and of love, support, resilience. I'm married to a cisgender white male who is an immigrant from Europe, and his immigration story is not the same as anybody else's in my family. We have 3 biracial children, the eldest of whom identifies as a Black woman with a white father, because that reflects her lived experience in this country. And so, please, I'm going to, let's call on Leilani. Leilani, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yes, and thank you, Fiona. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we
Can you see
can.
me? Okay. I come to you today. I'm as my identity as a Black woman with a white mother. I am a first generation college attender in higher education. Um, and as somebody who has you know, a pretty steeped coming to this space is a very steeped in lifelong advocate for equity, justice, and liberation. I've spent my career at the intersection of higher education, philanthropy, and the arts, always with the focus on creating space for voices that have been marginalized and histories that have been erased, and predominantly focusing on Black communities. I've been in the space we call DEI for quite some time at the University of Washington, where I've worked to shift some systems, build pathways for access, and ensure that Black stories are told for us and by us with the power that they deserve. So I'm bringing to this discussion today this identity of, you know, lower to middle class and jumping classes all throughout my life and my family's life. My mother was an immigrant. My father born in New Orleans in the 1920s. I come from a deep history, the Haitian tradition of root doctors, different healers and people who healed others. So as part of an extension of that lineage and in my DNA and in my lived experience, I come as a healer and I come as somebody who shares that healing practice with others. And that is me, Leilani Lewis.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Y'all, I have to contain myself. Thank you, Leilani. Kad, how about you?
Right on. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Kad Smith. I respond to he, him, his pronouns. I'm joining you all from unceded Ohlone land. Some folks refer to it as the Bay Area, San Francisco, California, right now. I am joining you all, I think, most importantly, as a father of a 3.5-year-old toddler. That identity is the one that I take the most pride in. And I've got my little cup here. You might be able to see his little cute face right there. I don't know, my background not doing me a solid, but my son, hero, Anthony Smith, is my pride and joy. Gives me a lot of purpose to think about what the future could look like. I join you I identify as a Black man. I could be biracial. I don't know my father's side, so there's a whole folklore there that one day I'll tell that story when it's appropriate. But I grew up in a Black household, raised by my grandmother, Dorothy Marie Smith. She taught me most of what I know, which has kind of influenced the way in which I have navigated spaces around, I shouldn't say kind of influence, it's entirely influenced the way I navigate spaces around liberation and what it looks like to be an active community member. She identified as a faith-based organizer, but definitely grew up under I would say, learning from the tutelage of Dr. King, Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party in the 60s and 70s in the Bay Area. And so a lot of what has motivated or given me the impetus to think about change is based on my grandmother's wisdom and the reflections that she had around the civil rights era and everything beyond. Aside from that, I've spent 15, maybe 16 years working with nonprofits across the country to specifically focus in on racial equity. So right now feels like what I'm going to say is an opportune moment to double down on all of the work that I know people on this call have been doing for the last several decades, and also to reframe the narrative of what's to come that isn't just focused on the threats we face. Last but not least, I also am, I think Fiona said, you are an attorney, but not practicing law. I'm hoping to enter the legal field. So have to be mindful of the communication patterns that I'm learning in law school and how they don't serve me in certain spaces and in certain ways. So, learning and unlearning at all times is one way to kind of articulate that. With that being said, I appreciate y'all so much and excited to be a part of this conversation. And we'll pass it back to you, Fiona, or to Robin.
Thank you, Kad. And maybe that's a topic for another webinar about how the legal profession and law school in particular is steeped in oppression. But Robin, last but not least, please introduce
Thank
yourself.
you. Hey, Kat, I just want to say, my husband used to say, law sharpens the mind by narrowing it. So just take so much from that. My name is Robin Chiles, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently on the Kitsap Peninsula of Washington State, the coastal Chiles people's lands. I am the mother of 5 adult children, which is I see as my success. My daughter recently finished her PhD in art history and just accepted a position at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, and she is shaking up. She is in decorative arts and architecture, and she is shaking up that world, doing things like placing African American or South African female artists' ceramic work in 18th century period rooms. So there could be dialogue between these pieces and things like that. My son currently works for Senator Maria Cantwell on the Hill and pulling very long hours. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning doing things. So they're fighting the fight. I have one daughter who is an epidemiologist in kidney transplant, but is currently working in an investment bank and another working in an investment bank. And then my youngest is just finished her master's from London School of Economics and is looking for work, has been working in the political arena and is looking for work in that area. So that's my pride and joy and legacy. I am a recent widow and I'm learning to move through the world through that lens. I currently work for the YMCA of Greater Seattle and am supporting talent development efforts and youth development leadership in the outdoors, both locally and nationally. I have kind of fell into equity and justice work through my work in nonprofits in outdoor leadership when I was looking at these well-intended folks, looking at the experiences of young people of color and seeing that we were doing harm. They didn't realize they were doing harm. So just started having folks look through that lens, and it just built into this career that I'm currently in, supporting equity and justice work. So I think that's about all. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah. And my mom was a pioneer in public health in women's reproductive rights. My father also worked in emergency medicine, but his passion was jazz music. He was a jazz musician. He grew up in New York, and my formative years were during, I'm going to call it the freedom movement, because that's what it was called first, and then it became the civil rights movement. But I remember my mom and fighting for the rights of Black women, young women, and my dad and my aunt, just a legacy of very powerful Black women. My aunt was an educator, and they really shaped the person that I am. And for always, we've been fighting this fight. You know, we talked about the principles that our country was founded on, and I really don't think those principles included us, people that look like us. And you know, they talked about manifest destiny, and the land was stolen. Those principles didn't include us. So we've always been fighting this fight, and we will continue to fight this fight until the land. I believe that our country is going to have to look a whole lot different than those founding principles that never were intended for us. So,
Robin, you already sharing a word, and we haven't even started the conversation. Wow. Thank you. Thank you all for introducing yourselves, sharing a little bit about yourselves with all of the attendees. Again, this is intended to be a conversation. So I'm going to provide the prompt, but I'm not going to call on y'all to answer because I want us to be in conversation with one another, right? So the first question is, in the wake of the most recent election, many Black folks, particularly Black women, have indicated that they are taking a step back from expending their energy on nationwide DEIB issues. So, how do you advise Black folks who are still genuinely concerned about these issues, right, and our liberation and the impact of what's going down on us and our community, but feel betrayed by what the election results indicate about the nation's current values? So, who'd like to jump in first?
I don't mind stepping in with this, but I'd love to have a conversation. I'm just so I'm starstruck by Kat and Robin right now. I'm just, you all are amazing. So please, we can wrap, and I want you to come in here. But for what I'm telling people, and I'm involved in a lot of different communities that are thinking about this. My my Listen, my family here, I live in Seattle, Washington. My family lives south of Seattle, and we don't we don't talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, liberation, and justice movements. I my people are just living their lives.
Mm-hmm,
That's where, and I love that because they just are in the moment. They're doing what they do. We work, we play, we kick it, we party, we have fun, we bring joy. Um, we we feed people in in our community. We make sure that people, if somebody is in want or need, we practice mutual aid. We don't call it mutual aid, but that is sort of where I'm 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 drawing my inspiration and advising people who are sort of in the more traditional or academic social justice, um, liberation and activism spaces that they need to sort of be like, we're doing mutual aid and we're doing this. I'm like, well, okay, this is how it looks. If you want to be involved, look at the communities around us, and there's need right here in front of our faces. There's
mm-hmm,
need for just loving space, healing space, knowledge space, intelligence, the things that we need to share and of what we know. So I just encourage people to find what they can bring to that
mm-hmm,
community, their own communities, and practice, um, opening gatherings, having space for open conversation, um, just making that space. If you can't create it, be part of it and contribute to
mm-hmm.
it. So that's what I'm telling people who, we can focus on our communities in a certain way.
Leilani, we know what to do.
Mhm.
We've always been doing it. And some of us have kind of gotten away from that and bought into the whole individuality. But we were never a people that put our people in nursing homes or
Mhm.
childcare. We took care, it takes a village, right? And we've always done that. We need to get back to that more than and recognize it and name it and talk about it. Right after the election, I just checked in with folks in my network with a simple text, just checking in, how are you? And I got responses ranging from I'm terrified, I'm sad, I'm numb, to I'm not surprised. They've been showing their hand for some time. This just confirms it. We must resist, use organizing tactics. And, I've been saying we need to look. I'm going to keep calling it the freedom movement, not the civil rights movement before it got all legal, but look to that freedom movement and learn from the past, and look to the Black women that were the backbone of that movement, Diane Nash and Ella Baker and Dorothy Height. There's so many more. We can do simple things like speak through silence. on the 28th, don't participate in commerce.
Right.
Document what you're doing. And when you do shop small, shop Black businesses, and just think back to the day, the Jim Crow laws, when they didn't want us in their businesses. They didn't want us doing that. Now we support our people. We support small business and do that. That speaks volumes. Think about the radicalness of Martin Luther King. There were Black women in the background behind all of that, and get in touch with that radicalness of him. That's what I've been telling people. That's what we're boycott what you can. Don't participate in businesses that are not supporting DEI efforts. Support nonprofits so that they don't have to be afraid that they're going to lose federal dollars and compromise their values.
Thank y'all for all that you've offered, and appreciate, Leilani, the kind of request for a conversation, and also Fiona and Robin, just the framing around us chatting. So what I'll share is in particular, the advising Black folks who are genuinely concerned. There's two things to kind of hold in tandem. One, it's okay to feel betrayed. And I think starting with that acknowledgement, I think y'all chose choice language with this question. I don't want to minimize or dismiss the betrayal that anyone is feeling, especially folks who have exuded such effort in their workplace, in their communities, and who maintain some optimism around this most recent election. I think Robin put it pretty well in terms of how a lot of my peers were feeling, which was we weren't surprised. I think a good indicator of how the election was going to go, and I'm going to speak plainly, was the conversations that I was privy to in Oakland, California, in the barbershop. That let me know everything I needed to know. If we talking like this in Oakland, California about this election cycle, I can only imagine how they're talking about it in other parts of this country. So in many ways, that betrayal is not a sentiment that I necessarily felt because it wasn't a surprise or it wasn't unexpected. But for the folks who do feel that way, I think an acknowledgement and just space and grace to extend to folks for feeling that way. I think for folks who are genuinely concerned about issues of equity, around issues of justice, it is about getting organized. Bobby Seale, founder of the Black Panther, said, "Power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner." I think Adrienne Marie Brown teaches us that this kind of small is all way of organizing can be extremely helpful in terms of thinking about our change efforts. So for me, if I'm advising somebody, it means get attached to an organization. It means find a group of people who share a politic with you. And a politic sometimes sounds overwhelming. Really, that's just like your values and your principles informing the choices you make every day. Find some folks that are aligned. Leilani said we feed folks in our community. We get people's material needs met, is one way I've heard it articulated. That is a commitment to equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it is very storied in the Black community across the diaspora, both in the context of the US and globally. So we figure out how to get it done. And I don't think that this moment in time will preconfigure any reason to look away from history. I do think it will require us to be more strategic around how we protect ourselves and how we stay resilient and also stay proud of who we are without not being how should I say this? I think we got to stay courageous in this particular time in the face of fascism being here in America. And it's unlike any time that I've been alive to see a fascist dictator in the White House with such prominence. So with that being said, I think it's an awesome opportunity for us to do things in a much more radical fashion because we can speak more plainly and we can be more direct about what we're facing.
So what would that radical fashion look like, Kad? Pretend nobody's listening. Tell us some ideas. What's going through your head?
Yeah, I
What
mean,
should we be talking about amongst ourselves?
I think I heard some of it, and I'll be concise here. To me, the organizing principle of self-determination is now more relevant than ever. So when we think about what mutual aid looks like, bringing that to scale, there's no reason that we shouldn't have in a predominantly Black community and our space, Black hospitals, Black schools. This is not to say that we can't be organizing in solidarity. And I do think cross-racial organizing is extremely important right now. But I don't think that that should come at the expense of Black folks in particular having our material met by other Black folks. So to me, the radical approach is a for us, by us approach that we cement. It looks, I think a bunch of different ways, but we have moments in history where we can turn to it. Healthcare programs, education, starting there, housing. I mean, housing and land, those are some of the biggest considerations. If people don't got shelter and people don't got a space and a place to return to and to go from every single day, we already are starting from, on the back burner. So that's what it looks like. And it means a different level of investment in our organizations and our newly lamented institutions, some of which have been notoriously overlooked. But I see, folks doing it in pockets across this country. I'll shout out the People's Programs in Oakland, California. They do it every single day. And I know if more people knew about what they were doing on a daily basis, more people's material needs can get met. So I'm always singing their praises because they're Panther Cubs that are doing exactly what the Panthers made motion on before COINTELPRO, and they're doing it highly effectively. All they need is more resources. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So I think it's possible. I know it's possible. It requires alignment from the collective.
Thank you. Thank you so much for expounding on that. I really, this conversation resonates with me so deeply because I do believe, especially given where my family comes from, that mutual aid, and you can find it all across the diaspora, right? So my granny lived with us. My mom came to live with my family, and I've already told my children, like, I had 3 of you so you could shuttle me around quarterly. Like, this is what we do. And when you are moving up, you don't forget those that you are moving. You don't forget the community you came from. You share, you give back. And that can take a variety of different manifestations. Before we jumped on, Robin and I were talking about, it is clear that we have to do something, that we have to take action. It's also clear that none of us can do all the things, right? And so I know this isn't in our, list of questions, but I would love to hear more about how we as a community can create more spaciousness and grace around some of us who do ABC and some of us who are doing XYZ. And so I'll give Kad and Leilani a little time to marinate on that. But Robin, you want to share with the group what we were talking about, and we can use that as a springboard?
Sure. I'm trying to remember what exactly I said. But I was saying that I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. We need to have more conversations like that and like this, and we need to ramp up the organizing efforts and come together in small groups and to make change. I don't remember exactly all that we said, what I was saying, Fiona, but this has thrown me off a little bit. You can tell, can't you?
No problem, Robin. It was something along the lines that some of us are going to be activists and on the front lines.
Yeah.
Some of us are going to be holding healing spaces and say,
Yeah.
we need to rest. Some of us are going to be making really fantastic music that is going to impact us for generations, and that we shouldn't judge which lane folks are going to be going into.
Right.
It's about, if we all have the same goal of liberation is the goal, and I'm not going to cancel, it's used too much, I think, nowadays, but I'm not going to disregard you, shame you, slam you for choosing the lanes that you're in, as long as we are aligned in the destination.
And Fiona, you just saying that just made me think of part of my network, of support. We get together about once a month and we share. Well, and we talk all the time or online through text and share knowledge. And I just had dinner with the group, and we talked about Loretta Ross's book, Calling In. And that was one of the things I said, well, what is a point that you took away from? I think she was recently in Washington State on her book tour. And what was the takeaway? And it was that not shaming, like it was something like grow up, and don't think, oh, that was performative. People are trying, give people grace. And we're all in this together. And Kad, what you were saying about nothing about us without us, but it has to be, yes, we need to take care of our Black community, but there are more of us than there are of them. And the power will come is in us all coming together. All the indigenous people of this land, the immigrants of this that have come to this land, is all coming together. That we are so strong. There is strength in community, and do what you can. Rest is resistance. That's my Trisha Hersey, and do what you can, tap out, because there are others that will step up in your place, but we just have to keep driving, not to get distracted by, Kad, you probably do this with your little one. You dangle keys for the distraction, that noise, right? So don't look over all this, the Gulf of America and all of that, those things of distraction. Get over this. We're in a poly crisis right now, and just try to stay strong and move with courage through it. Form these groups. I feel like this little network of powerful women I have can grow into something bigger. Just what you, Fiona, and Jess did. You saw a need and you broke away from your stable jobs to take that chance to do this work. We need to do more of that. We have it within us. We all have it. We can do it. We can do it. We're going to have to do it. We did it before. We can do it again.
Absolutely. I love that, what you said. I love this idea. I think, Kad, you said it, and Robin, you sort of illuminated that or expanded it a bit more, is that this sort of small action toward bigger movement and bigger results just coming together. And I'll give this more tangibly. I've started organizing Black women to come together to talk about preparation for disaster, or if you need to do something, and we come together and we create little kits, sort of go bag type things. And we talk about the moment, but we talk about our families and our kids and our lives in that space, but we're also, we're each contributing something to support one another. So started organizing these groups to come together. I'm in a position to organize, and I really realize that that's not the position that everybody is in. I also want to, I just think that that's such a beautiful concept, and Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategies really dives into that as a wonderful framework for moving forward, and honoring other people's honoring everyone's sort of gifts that they're bringing to the movement. I also, and this might be controversial to say, but I was just on a talk with Ta-Nehisi Coates, talking about his last book, The Message. And he talks about he talked about in person this sort of radical love for everyone, and not necessarily doesn't mean you have to include everyone, but he talks about this radical love, and I think about that in terms of the divisions within our communities. You're on why aren't you protesting on the front lines? Why aren't you, doing this? So I'm a writer, and my marching days, they might not be over, but it's getting there, and my daughter's grown and I've got, she's out there now, and I'm in a different space and where I'm going to contribute to the movement. But I have friends who are working in corporate America, who straighten their hair to get by, who do things they need to do to survive. And I can't love them any less. They're surviving. They're applying their education. Most of them are in philanthropy, so they're in caring space, but in a space where they're meant to care for others. But I want to extend that our community is so multifaceted, and there are so many expressions of Blackness, and so many different ways that we're approaching it. And so I want to even expand it even further, this notion that some of us are bringing this different things to the movement, and I tend to be in this space where I maybe could be considered radical, but I do know people who aren't be in that space, or aren't in the phase where they can be in that space. And I want to extend our grace to them too, and always extend a bridge to come with us. But I don't want to fall, and I don't want to be down on anyone doing what they need to survive these days, honestly. Um, I have family members that sell illegal things, and do what they need to do to get by. Do I agree with it? No, but I'm in a space where I'm inclined not to judge, and Ta-Nehisi Coates really emphasized that in his latest talk for me. So
Yeah, I appreciate what y'all are articulating in terms of this kind of notion of what it looks like to accept people where they're at, to be intentional about not leading from a place of judgment. I really do think that that's like of such significance and importance right now. And it requires a lot, right? Like, I don't know, I'll speak plainly. Sometimes I hear how people are rocking in this world right now, and my initial reaction is judgment, and I feel something in my gut, or I feel some type of way. So that's a part of unlearning. That's a part of discipline, to be quite honest with us. And like that takes work, right? Some people find that work through a spiritual practice. Some people find it through the community that you build. Some people just do deep inner work, as they talk about over at Change Elemental. Whatever you got to do to get right relationship with yourself, I don't have no expertise on everyone's individual lived and learned experiences, so I can't pretend to. I just know for me, there's different work that actually works, and then there is, to Robin's point, some distractions. I think about Pauli Murray, who was a legal scholar who helped frame the kind of narrative that Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP used for Brown v. Education. And what Pauli Murray said is, when my brothers try to draw a circle, I just dropped it in chat. I don't think y'all can see it yet. I'll drop it in chat for everybody in a moment. But Pauli Murray says, when my brothers try to draw a circle to exclude me, I shall draw a larger circle to include them. Where they speak out for the privileges of a puny group, I shall shout for the rights of all mankind. And Pauli Murray was, at that time, regarded as a Black woman. Gender identity has expanded since then, and not sure how Pauli Murray in 2025 would identify. That being said, was a Black woman, was a legal scholar who was brilliant. I mean, quite literally changed the way we think about separate but equal as a non-respectable. It never was, but changed the way in which the highest court of our land, thought about that with her brilliance, her Black brilliance. So I think about that because that must have taken a lot from Pauli Murray in a time where was facing extreme discrimination, even by Black folks, to have that level of empathy. So I don't think there's any easy way for us to arrive at that type of commitment to beloved community, as Grace Lee Boggs would put it. But I do think what I saw from Robin in the chat around what Voulet has shared, what I've heard Cindy Suarez, who was formerly at Nonprofit Quarterly, talk about, is like how important interactions are. So Cindy Suarez, as a person with a background in feminist theory and organizational development, talks about power being developed in every interaction you have. So in an interaction, I can either engage with you in a liberatory way or in a dominating way, right? And if I choose domination actively or subconsciously, it's probably not going to result in us building together or us operating in a liberated fashion towards some North Star. If I choose to liberatory practices in my interactions, which are the most accessible thing to me on any given day to day, the way I engage with another human being is what I have the most control over, then maybe we do get to a place where we're able to accept each other for where we are and coming from. That's what I try and attach my hope to, is that if I try and choose to be engaging with folks in a liberatory fashion, that maybe liberation will come to fruition. Some might say that's naive. I would say that that's hopeful and keeps me wanting to wake up in the morning. So, that's how I get down. And I hope that if we start to see patterns of that, then we start to experience it in a widespread level.
Tad, can I use what you just shared as a springboard for a bit of a shift in the conversation? So let's say the suggestion is to organizations, right, to engage each other and staff and management and leadership in a liberatory fashion. Then what kind of specific advice would you give to those organizations to provide effective resources and support to their Black staff to endure what we know we're going to be enduring, not only in 2025, but for years to come? What does that liberatory engagement look like? Or something else?
Wouldn't it be amazing if the organizations could do what Kad was talking about, what he's doing? Wouldn't that be amazing if they had the courage to do that? I think that would go a long way with the Black staff, you know? And that's going to take a lot of courage on their part to do that.
I think one thing that I notice is hard for folks. It's hard. Let me speak from a place of I. It's hard for me, so I imagine it can be hard for other folks as well. Um, you know, a mentor of mine says when you f it up, I ain't gonna use the choice language that he might say. When you f it up, clean it up. When you mess it up, clean it up. We have not learned at the largest level of our society what true atonement and taking responsibility looks like. This country fails to acknowledge that reparations are needed for Black folks, not now, like yesterday. Like we are owed quite literally for the historical injustices that have happened at government sanctioned levels. But the country can't even take responsibility. So it doesn't necessarily provide a paradigm for individuals in their interactions to take responsibility for when they have wronged folks. So if we think about it individually, interpersonally, institutionally, and then societally, we don't got the best models at the widespread level for taking accountability and trying to address grievances that are, rooted in actual facts and rooted in real experiences. So yes, I think it is courageous for organizations to take responsibility for having wronged their Black staff. And I think that also requires a certain level of grace and maturity of everyone involved, right? If an organization says, you know what, we noticed we had a very bad practices around treating Black women, we had an exodus of Black women. The only way that stops is if the organization can say it and then not feel like the entire fabric of that organization is going to unwind, right? I mean, that's what the real fear usually comes down to, in my opinion, is that if you take this acknowledgement, that then everything goes, out the window and we have to start all over again. Can it be a both then? Taking accountability for doing wrong and then making commitments with good faith being extended to you from both the people you've wronged and the people who want to see better for those who have been wronged. So I think it is a courageous act, but it has to start with the acknowledgement of when we've done something that was out of line or that was wrong and the consequences, and then what you're going to do differently, right? A mentor of mine would say feedback is only as valuable as it is actionable. And that was Asha Mehta, who I worked with at Compass Point for many years. And I thought that was just such a very helpful indication of, if I'm going to get feedback on what I've done wrong, it's also only valuable if you're going to make a request of me of what I can do right, and then I can agree to that commitment. And I do think organizations can do that. Pay our folks, maternity leave. I mean, there's a bunch of things we can do to address some of the grievances that I see in a patterned way.
Leilani, I see you're unmuted.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I totally agree. And if we look at liberation and just subscribe to the idea that it is not just about not having oppression present, but building something, building sword self-determination, the building the conditions for freedom. It's just more, it becomes clear what I think organizations can do. But I agree with Kat. I don't think we have great models for this. I think we have some models for mitigating the harm. We have some models for mitigating harm in the workplace. But if we're looking at organizations, and I'm thinking about philanthropic organizations, higher education, in the arts, and other cultural spaces, I do a lot of consulting in these spaces, and this is my work. And the most, and I'm not a cynic, but the most I can see is mitigating harm, and they're not working toward building. It would be a radical act for an organization like mine, like the University of Washington, to acknowledge and do active repair, reconciliation, and truth telling in a way that would then spur the radical imagination needed to build a whole new system around it. Like, it is so systemic. And there's so many band-aids around it that the kids love this. I'm not terribly interested in dismantling because I'm a builder. But new systems need to be conceived, because so goes in my education, so goes the inside of an organization as is the outside of the organization. So the work we do together impacts the work we do. If you cannot acknowledge or respect or come to curiosity and agreement within your organization, how is that impacting the people you serve? How is that impacting the students we serve, the people that we're inviting to our spaces? So I'm just very much of the mind that with internal, whoever has the power and the levers of the internal organizations need to make hard decisions in order to make things right for Black folks. And I believe in reparations would be one gesture toward that as well.
Leilani, what you just shared, for me, is so key, right? Because if we think about systemic oppression, it works because people, organizations know that if I do something, if the organization does something radical, the system is going to target us, right? And so then you're trapped in fear as an organization to do the radical thing, right? And so I think, Robin, you mentioned this word, bravery. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's going to take a certain level of bravery from certain organizations to be that only organization. That's just today. It might not be the only organization that does the radical thing, and it might have ripple effects that, you know, there are more tomorrow, and it has a magnifying effect, right? The other thing that I would say is be brave not only for Black staff, because what we know is that when you share and focus resources and practice a liberatory management a liberatory management mindset and engagement, ways of engaging Black staff, all those folks with marginalized identities are going to rise, right? And so it is not just about, I'm going to focus on Black staff to the exclusion of everyone else, but we know what benefits Black staff is going to benefit everyone else. The last thing I would share before we jump to one more question before we open it up, Black folks, and Jess and I did this in terms of like taking that leap. If you are in an organization or a space that doesn't appreciate you, doesn't value you, doesn't want to give you and your Black colleagues and your other marginalized colleagues the support and resources and love on you the way you deserve, go out there and either find a space that does or create that space yourself. Right? And I know that that is coming from a position of privilege. When I did it, I was older, right? I had multiple advanced degrees behind my name, right? But I feel personally that a radical approach is to say, this isn't working for me. And if enough of us say this isn't working for me, something's got to change. Something has got to give. So I want to open it up to the Q&A that's coming up fairly shortly, but I want to ask you three to discuss what you're doing in 2025 and the years to come to thrive and rise. You've touched on it a little bit for what it means for community and community care. What are you doing?
I can say that I am holding space for others. I'm an elder. I'm in the sunset of my career, but just being there for others feeds my soul. I'm also spending as much time as I can in spaces that I love that feed my soul. I was just sharing with Fiona that I've just come back from Hawaii. I'm a water person, and the ocean, the mana of that land. Right now, there are huge swells, and people were talking about how angry the ocean was. And I was like, I don't feel that. I feel the power of the ocean, and that connection I feel to the ocean, it gave me power. I felt that power. I felt united with that. So spaces like that are feeding my soul so that I can be present for others. Trisha Hersey, the rest is resistance. That's my guiding principle right now. It's like, you know, where I work, just in employment, they will work you to death and then say, oh, she was an amazing person, and just keep going. I tap, like you were saying, Fiona, just tap out. Like, you need me more than I need you right now. I also have that privilege that I can say, you can take this and I can go somewhere else. Or, I see so many young people that, especially at the Y, that are emerging adults that I stay because I want to support and help and create those spaces. Working with the employee resource groups, there's a lot of power there. That's all those marginalized identities, what you were talking about, Fiona, those marginalized identities, making senior leadership make space for them to come together and elevating those voices to amplify the mission and direction of the organization. Can go a long way. Also creating that space with creating working group, a committee we put together in the various areas to look at systemic change, to look at the assets and deficits of the organization. But yeah, I just tap out, and I have that small circle of friends that, community means a lot to me. That's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm.
Kad or Leilani, what are y'all doing?
I will say that I have a typical disposition to kind of be too heady and cerebral. So what I'm doing is trying to combat that. And there's this Baldwin. I got Baldwin up here specifically. I think Baldwin is perhaps the most uh, therapeutic literary artist of that I've come across. Let's just put it that way. I read James Baldwin and I'm like, man, I wish I would have got this. I get that question where they're like, if you could meet any person alive or dead, who would it be? And I'm like, James Baldwin every single time. Love to sit down for a dinner with James Baldwin. But James Baldwin has this quote where he says, like, the poets, by which I mean all artists, are finally the only people who know the truth about us. Soldiers don't, statesmen don't, priests don't, only the poets. And to me, what's so helpful about that is, especially in my legal training and my professional life, the kind of technical and the cerebral have been the things that I've been celebrated for, and which have allowed me to have choices. But they've also then come at the expense sometimes of me putting more time into understanding the beauty of what we get from those people who are artists and who are creatives and lead with that. And the truth that they're telling right now, that my friends who are rappers, my friends who are filmmakers, my friends who are writers, the truth that they are telling is the thing that's helping me thrive. And so I'm trying my hardest to connect in those spaces. To listen to somebody just play a guitar right now is so profoundly moving. Just to have people get together and play the drums. Like the rhythm in general is so healing. So to me, I'm doing everything I can to not just double down on the stuff that has been where I've kind of found my way of flourishing, but trying to open myself up to the healing nature of the arts and the truth that, as Baldwin put it, the poets are telling us right now. There's something, that I think we can be grateful for, the rich history of culture change that comes from Black creatives. And like, I just want to lean into all of the spaces where we are celebrating that.
Thank you so much. Leilani?
I love that. I love what you both have said. And I've sort of, because you're so brilliant, I have to like, it helps me build what I'm doing too. So what I'm doing in 2025, therapy. I'm a big, I love James Baldwin. So I love that you said that, Kat. And my favorite quote is that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So I am consuming a lot. I do want to know what's going on. I do keep up on the things that are happening in the community and in this country. I'm keeping up on things, so I'm reading a lot. I'm doing and I'm also, I guess I'm a chronic organizer, so I organize with Black women to produce events. I'm producing one March 16th if you're in Seattle. So on menopause and perimenopause in Black community. I run a group called Black Women Write Seattle, where our work is to get Black women who either want to write or are writers. We have published really very published authors in our group, to publishing, the pathway to publishing and to fellowships and to write, to get more Black women voices published and out into the world. It's amazing how many incredible writers there are that don't think they're great writers, and this group is about letting people know they're great writers and getting them published. We talk about the business of publishing, so I run that. That's every month. We have a wonderful group. We have about 100 folks who are members. I, you know, I I'm doing, I'm in the arts and culture realm, so, donating to organizations. I'm consulting. I'm staying active, but I'm also I'm a fan of Octavia Butler. So if anybody's read Parable of the Sower, I'm a speculative fiction fan. I believe in the brilliance of building and radical imagination as part of the visioning that can happen in our communities. But I'm also a bit of a prepper. So I like Parable of the Sower. I'm trying to figure out what my apocalypse skill is. Um, I can't fly a plane, but I am very close to getting my boating license because I too love the ocean. Robin, I shout out to you. So I'm just like 2 questions away from getting my boating license here in Washington, so I can drive the boat.
Leilani,
If
I
we need
love
it, if
this.
we need
I
a
love
water
it.
route, if we
I
need to
love
take it
it.
out of here. So I'm doing some things, but yeah, that's 2025 for me.
Thank you. I love that. And I love speculative fiction as well. February has been 10 books by Black female authors, N.K. Jemisin, all of them, like all of it. So yes, I'm with you on that boat, and we're going to talk offline about all the other things you just shared because really love that. So what I would like to do now is to shift to some questions that have come up in the Q&A. Um, let's see. The first one is, are there any umbrella organizations to help connect, organize between movements working towards the same vision? Any thoughts come to you? How about that? How about this? We'll put a pin in that one.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
if it'll be so helpful for folks in the Pacific Northwest, but there are orgs down here by which I mean in the Bay Area, like Movement Strategy Center, that I feel like is an organization that has embodied that for the longest time. Tides Community Foundation is an organization that tries to provide that kind of umbrella. Whether you could qualify it exactly based on how that question is framed as an umbrella organization that gets toward that end in everything it does, I don't know. But there's some orgs that are trying, I think, to be creative. I think about Sustainable Economies Law Center and what they do to provide umbrella resources as well. So I think there are folks that are taking noble efforts towards providing kind of umbrella convening power for sure. But can't speak as well to what y'all would have up in the Pacific Northwest, readily available.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are a few up here. Some of them I'm not sure if they're functioning in the same way that they did a few years ago. So I would have to check, but I'm happy to contribute to any sort of resource list or anything that can go out to the participants. I'm really a fan of some of the land work that's happening, and I think that that's a convening space. So there's the Yeehaw collective, and I'll find that link. And then there's a black owned farm in here in Auburn, Washington, that is also sort of like a collective organizing space that's developing. So I'll find that link as well and put it in. But there are some here. I just need to look up and see if they're still in operation.
Thank you, Leilani. The work that Sean Watts is doing with there's some organizing around land, and I can't think of the name of the organization. They started a nonprofit, and it's kind of an umbrella. I can't think of. Well, we'll have to pull some things together and give it to Fiona and Cassie and Jess.
Terrific. Thank you. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts on that. The next question we have is, does the panel have any recommendations for an entry-level introduction to liberatory design or liberatory practices, especially for an organization that tends to lean academic?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Go
I would
ahead.
say National Equity Project, I have been the beneficiary of. I don't know if we lean academic at Compass Point, but I've been working with Compass Point for 10 years, and we definitely can be kind of, ideation heavy or whatnot. And they helped us on some work around liberatory design processes on our commitment to what we call pro-Blackness, so not just focused on anti-Blackness and eradicating that from our organization's DNA, but like having a pro-Black politic. So I would say National Equity Project, and they are an organization that has a tremendous history of working with specifically, school districts, educational environments, et cetera. So highly, highly appreciated the work of the National Equity Project in partnership with them, and know that they've worked with other folks towards the liberatory design framework being applied to create something or to commit to something.
Thank you, Kat. Leilani, I thought I heard you come off mute to share.
I was going to say the National Equity Project, and I think there is an organization called the Black Liberation Lab. And I want to make sure that they're still in, and they're focused on the work. But I would say too, Berkeley's school with John Powell offers some of these frameworks and these not specific to Black liberation, but I think that I've forgotten the name of it. It's bridging and belonging concepts, and yeah, Belonging Berkeley, that's that institute has a lot of resources that are pertain to also nonprofit and education spaces. So those frameworks, the Othering and Belonging Institute at Berkeley is another one that comes to mind.
Thank you. This is the last question that I see, but either Cassie or Jess will tell me if anything has come up in the chat. The question is, in y'all's work, have you been involved in the creation of intentional living communities and skill development, i.e. growing your own food, first aid, disaster preparedness, etc.? Leilani, I sense this might be going towards you for the first response. Curious about how we are divesting from systems destroying us and the earth so we can create our own for us, by us.
Yeah, I think this is a great question and something that I grapple with quite often. I've become, I think, in recent years, more of a student of what it looks like to be not a individual survivalist or like prepper, but like do this in a mutual way. So like I said, I organize groups, but I do a lot of um like just my own research on how this is done uh to prepare for disaster. And I don't know about growing food, but I do have, friends that volunteer on farms and do farming and are doing garden work. But there is a lot of the ways that we divest from the systems or relinquish our dependence or create the communities or intentional communities is by doing what Fiona and I think Robin were talking about earlier, is seeking out people with skills, with interests that are the same, but skills that are different, or can bring new ideas to the table. So that's how we divest. And we examine our consumerism, as Robin was talking about earlier, and thinking about the hyper local ways we can stimulate our own economies. There's a farmers collective that people can plug into, and they think some of them do CSAs and some of them, there's all kinds of lists and things that are out there that are available. But I mean, when we're thinking about preparing or like growing our own food, it's not necessarily about I guess you can frame it as divesting, but we have to maybe frame it also as what are we building for ourselves, and what are we bringing our how are we passing that on to our children? How do we make it sustainable? I think a lot of us in the future here are going to have to think about what we want to create once this system sort of eats itself. We're going to need new systems, and we're going to need, we might need to know how to do CPR, and we want to know how to care for others and grow our own food. And so, there's just a lot of resources out there, but you have to get involved in building that sometimes for ourselves.
Leilani, you speak truth. One of the things that I've been able to do in the work that I've been doing with young people in the outdoors is I talk about, sojourner truth and also getting their wilderness first aid. Like, that help. That's prepping, right? The skills that you learn in that wilderness first aid. If higher medical help is not available, what do you have around you that you can help someone that needs medical attention? We need to do those things, like learning about the environment that's around you, how to read, just read the environment, to get connected. We've always been people that are connected to the land, and we need to get back to that, because that will help us thrive. So we may not always be able to go to a store, or just we don't know what's going to happen next, and it's not far-fetched to prepare for that. Yeah.
Thank you both for that. And as you were speaking, it's not necessarily related directly, but I was also thinking about the to boycott Target or not to boycott Target, to
Mhm.
have targeted, excuse the pun, boycotting at Target. Um, and a part of that narrative was for some communities, it's a food desert.
Right.
So where are we supposed to go buy our groceries, our food, our meet our needs, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, that what your exchange, Robin and Leilani, made me think of, well, actually, do we have to wait for the apocalypse to
No.
address the food
Mhm.
deserts, right? Like we have rooftop gardens in the South Bronx that are feeding communities in a smaller scale. Like let's start thinking about how we can um I hate this phrase, but scale up those community efforts, right?
Yeah.
But in community and in collaboration
Mhm.
with one another.
I can remember, people having in Baltimore, all having little gardens and having too many green peppers, but someone else has something else, and you're giving to someone has chickens, and do you want some eggs? And my grandfather was a Pullman porter, and he had the he lived in New York, a New York to Florida run, and he wanted his granddaughter to have oranges from Florida, and he would give these big bushel bags of oranges that I couldn't possibly eat before they went bad. Everyone in our neighborhood had a dozen oranges because we were giving everyone oranges. We can take care of each other. You don't need to have a plot of land to grow. You just need to access the soil and seeds, and put it in a pot and do container gardening.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So, listen, I can't believe that an hour and a half has gone by so quickly, but I wanted to give y'all an opportunity if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to share. And in the meantime, Cassie is going to be putting in the chat for all of the attendees and evaluation, and we would love your feedback. But, Kad, we haven't heard from you for a minute. You want to share any closing thoughts?
Just immense gratitude for everybody. You could have been anywhere on a Wednesday, morning. You chose to be here, both with my colleagues as panelists, but also all of the attendees who were here listening and contributing in the chat. I think the closing remarks would just be right now, I think more than ever, I had a professor actually who said, you got to show yourself love in the most radical way. Like whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, quite literally many of us are in the crosshairs, right? Living in precarity on the margins, and some of us may feel like we're removed from it, but for how long, right? So with that being said, I'm wishing and hoping for everyone that you will be able to tend to both yourself and the collective with your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being as your highest priority, because we need all of us to get through what's, I think, to come. Thank y'all for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Kad. Leilani, Robin?
Well, I'm going to say that we have to be courageous because I feel in the near future participating in events like this might take courage. So we're going to have to practice courage. Maya Angelou said courage is the most important of all the virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So we need to show courage.
Thank you. Leilani?
Um, I'll leave folks with this. Audre Lorde said, and I follow this really carefully, is caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. I don't want to sugarcoat anything for anyone. Our communities are under attack. And so in the ways that you take care of yourself, you are resisting that attack. You are fighting back. She also said, without community, there is no liberation. So whatever it is you need to do to be in community, however you heal, or whatever it is, the barriers that are presented to you, let's find ways, and I'm happy to talk through it to get you to community, to get you to the spaces that are gonna save you and save all of us. So let's work together, and I'm here for it. There's something coming, and we're ready. And I got your back. Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness. Thank you all. I can't, words can't express the level and depth of my gratitude to each and every one of you. I'm hoping maybe there could be a 2.0 of this conversation, because I think we could dive so much deeper, and I really, really appreciate your time, your energy, and your words of wisdom. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank y'all
you.
so much. Have a
Thank
good
you
one, y'all.
all. Yes,
Take
thank
care.
you.